Preventing caught in or between hazards. Preventing accidents always starts with you as a worker. Even if you recognize all the hazards on a work site, accidents are likely to occur unless you have a desire to keep yourself and others safe. Participating in training courses and learning all company policies and OSHA regulations pertaining to your job site will aid you in making safe decisions while on the job. Planning. No matter the industry, proper planning is one of the key factors to maintaining a safe work zone. Before work begins, you should look for potential hazards and think of ways you can address them safely. Each task will present different safety concerns, so a blanket safety plan is rarely the best option. Each task should be planned individually to ensure all safety concerns are accounted for. After planning for the job, the site manager should make sure that every worker is aware of the hazards present in their line of work and how they should avoid them. Barricades. As mentioned, distance can be the safest guard of all. It is important to not only keep a safe distance from the moving parts on machines but to stay a safe distance from the operating machines themselves. Barricades can be one of the best ways to assure workers stay free from caught in or between hazards as a result of contacting heavy machinery. Whenever work takes place around equipment that poses a caught in or between hazard, you can use one or all of the following methods to ensure workers are kept a safe distance away from the danger. Caution tape. Physical barricades. Flagging personnel. Whenever barricades are used, they must be regularly maintained. Barriers should be visible from a distance and should send a clear message that workers are not to cross into the area during operations. If at any point part of the barrier is knocked down, comes loose, or is damaged, it should be repaired or replaced immediately. Anytime the machine moves to a different location, it is important that the barricade moves with it. Proper materials handling. There are many different types of materials that may be found on a work site, and we cannot cover all of them here. Each type of material is different, as are the ways in which they should be handled. However, there are some general materials handling procedures that you should follow no matter what you are working with. When moving loads overhead, such as those suspended by a crane, make sure to stay as clear as possible. If you are helping to guide the load into place, use a tag line in order to keep your distance. All other workers should be kept well out of the load's path of travel. Lastly, be careful that you do not come between the load and its final resting place. When using mechanical means to move a load of materials, three major caught in or between hazards exist. First, the load can come off a machine, trapping someone underneath. Second, the machine and load can trap someone against an immovable object such as a building. And third, the machine can run over a worker, trapping them underneath. The first hazard, a load falling off the machine, can be mitigated by making sure the load is properly secured to whatever machine is moving it. A load should never be moved unless it is fully seated and secured. The way the load is secured will vary depending on the type of machine being used and the materials being carried. This is why it is important to read the operator's manual. Everyone working with or around the machine must know the proper way to transport a load, as well as how to secure the load for travel. The second hazard, being trapped between a machine and an immovable object, can be avoided simply by ensuring workers on the ground pay special attention to their location. Workers should not put themselves between the machine and any immovable objects, such as buildings or other equipment, unless it is absolutely necessary. Lastly, the machine operator needs to have a clear line of sight and needs to clearly communicate what they are doing using verbal commands, hand signals and the alarms on the machine. The third hazard, being run over and trapped under the machine, can be avoided so long as the machine operator and the workers on the ground are aware of one another. Making a plan before the shift will help as well. This plan should address where the machine will be moving the materials and outline its path of travel. All workers on site should be familiar with the plan and keep clear of the path of travel during operations. Proper materials handling by hand. Many of the same principles apply to moving materials by hand as we have discussed with mechanical materials handling. Materials can fall from storage locations, trapping workers underneath. Falling loads can also trap workers between the material being handled and an immovable object. Whenever moving large or heavy objects by hand, it is important to pre-plan and assess where you will be working. For example, You are attempting to maneuver a large pipe off the side of a flatbed truck. The pipe is one in a stack of 12, each weighing 90 pounds, 40.8 kilograms. The side of the truck that the pipe needs to end up on only provides 5 feet, 1.5 meters, of room between the side of the truck and the side of a building. The other side of the truck is clear for 70 feet, 21.3 meters. Which side should you attempt to unload the pipe from? We must stop and plan the safest possible way to unload this pipe. This should start by assessing the worst possible outcome and working our way down the list of what could happen. In this case, one of the worst possible outcomes would be the load of pipes rolling off and trapping you between the wall on the side with 5 feet, 1.5 meters, of clearance. Clearly, the safest route is to unload on the open side of the truck. Trenches. Trench and excavation work can be extremely hazardous. Being caught in or between while working in or near excavations is very common. Pipe or other materials can fall onto workers, trapping them or crushing them. Workers can also be caught between excavating equipment and the side of a trench wall if they get too close. Being in a trench can be hazardous even if there is no equipment or materials present. Trench cave-ins kill workers every year. Trench safety is a more complex topic than those discussed up to this point, so if you work in trenching and excavation, make sure to receive proper training. Trenches 5 feet or deeper must be protected using any of the following protective systems, designed or verified by a competent person and/or engineer. Sloping, shoring, benching, trench shield. In many cases, even trenches that are less than 5 feet deep must be secured. Protective systems are used to ensure that trenches do not collapse onto workers. Guardrails and suspended load clearances. Guardrail requirements can actually create a hazard at the leading edge of installed floor or roof sections by creating the potential for employees to be caught between guardrails and suspended loads. Ensure there is an allowance for a clear workspace or path through which to guide any suspended load into position for placement and welding of members. Operational plans must always allow for adequate work areas in which to move suspended loads. Stacking building materials. Building materials must be stacked to prevent them from toppling over. Always allow enough space around stacks of materials or wide walkways to allow workers to quickly move out of the way in case materials slide or are accidentally pushed over.
Tako, tako.
Laboratory exercise. Avoiding caught in and caught between hazards. Instruct. Lesson summary. Operational plans must always allow for adequate work areas in which to move suspended loads. While guardrails are a critical engineering control used to protect workers from falling, they can pose a caught in or between hazard under certain circumstances. Guardrail requirements can actually create a hazard at the leading edge of installed floors or roof sections by creating a possibility of employees being caught in between guardrails and suspended loads. Because workers can also be caught between the sides of a collapsed trench that is not properly braced, or warehoused construction materials that were not correctly stacked to prevent sliding, engineering and workplace controls like shoring, fall protection systems, and properly stacking building materials are essential to keep workers safe.
Mrdaj ispred mene.
Module 4. Personal Protective Equipment. Module Description. This module will educate employers and employees on the proper selection, care, and use of personal protective equipment, PPE, along with the compliance requirements set by OSHA standards. Module Learning Objectives. At the conclusion of this module, students will be able to describe the role of PPE in controlling exposure to hazards in the workplace, identify parts of the body most vulnerable to injury and name hazards associated with each, describe the appropriate PPE to be worn for worker safety. Lesson 1. Introduction to Personal Protective Equipment. Lesson Focus. At the end of this lesson, students will be able to explain what personal protective equipment is and why it is used. Explain OSHA's personal protective equipment standards. List the employer's responsibilities. List the employee's responsibilities. What is personal protective equipment? No matter your industry or workplace, there is always the chance of being exposed to hazards that can cause serious injury or illness. Whether they be chemical, physical, electrical, mechanical, or even radiological hazards, there is PPE for it, and you have the right to be protected from all hazards at all times. Personal protective equipment, commonly called PPE, is worn to minimize exposure to hazards that cause serious workplace injuries and illnesses. These injuries and illnesses may result from contact with chemical, radiological, physical, electrical, mechanical, or other workplace hazards. Personal protective equipment may include items such as gloves, safety glasses and shoes, earplugs or muffs, hard hats, respirators, coveralls, vests, or full-body suits. All personal protective equipment should be safely designed and constructed. It should be properly maintained and kept clean. It should fit comfortably, encouraging worker use. If the personal protective equipment does not fit properly, it can make the difference between being safely covered or dangerously exposed. When engineering, work practice, and administrative controls are not feasible or do not provide sufficient protection, employers must provide personal protective equipment to their workers and ensure its proper use. Employers are also required to train each worker who is required to use personal protective equipment so that they know when it is necessary, what kind is necessary, how to properly put it on, adjust, wear, and take it off, the limitations of the equipment, proper care, maintenance, useful life, and disposal of the equipment. If PPE is to be used, a PPE program should be implemented. This program should address the hazards present, the selection, maintenance, and use of PPE, the training of employees, and the monitoring of the program to ensure its ongoing effectiveness. Personal Protective Equipment Standards. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration requires that, when necessary, employers establish and administer an effective personal protective equipment, PPE, program for employees in order to reduce the effects of workplace hazard exposure and, as a result, the workplace accident rate. OSHA requires protective equipment, including personal protective equipment for eyes, face, head, and extremities, protective clothing, respiratory devices, and protective shields and barriers, shall be provided, used, and maintained in a sanitary and reliable condition wherever it is necessary by reason of hazards of processes or environment, chemical hazards, radiological hazards, or mechanical irritants encountered in a manner capable of causing injury or impairment in the function of any part of the body through absorption, inhalation or physical contact. 1926.95a. Payment for PPE. When PPE is required to protect employees, it must be provided by the employer at no cost to the employees, except for specific items, including safety toe footwear, including steel-toe shoes or steel-toe boots, not limited to the worksite, prescription safety eyewear, everyday clothing and weather-related gear, logging boots. Employer or employee responsibilities. Practice opportunity. Who is responsible for providing the following when needed? Select the button in the employer or employee column corresponding to your answer. Employer responsibilities. In order to ensure that PPE is provided, used, and maintained in a reliable condition, companies are required to provide a personal protective equipment program. This program includes several sections that ensure employees are trained in every aspect of the PPE that they are required to use. This is important if the job requires PPE that can be confusing to use, or for employees new to a particular PPE. To have an approved PPE program, it must contain these sections: hazards assessment, selection of PPE, training of employees, maintenance of PPE, uses of PPE, program effectiveness. Hazard assessment. The employer must assess the workplace to determine if hazards are present, or are likely to be present, that may necessitate the use of personal protective equipment. While an employer's first responsibility upon identification of a workplace hazard is to eliminate it through the use of engineering controls and administrative controls, PPE often is the final solution for remaining hazards. Click on each image to view the details. Physical hazards. Health hazards. Selection of PPE. When it comes to selecting PPE, keep in mind that this is the most important step in the entire process. Evaluating and assessing the hazards in your workplace will be all but pointless if you do not choose the correct PPE to protect against the hazards discovered. Choose the PPE that will provide the most safety, as well as the best fit, comfort, and design, as this will make it more encouraging to wear throughout the workday. The selection of personal protective equipment depends on the hazard the worker needs to be protected against, the level of hazard present, and the availability of suitable equipment. Individual components of clothing and equipment should be assembled to both protect the worker from the specific hazard as well as minimize any hazards, such as tripping, that might arise from the PPE itself. PPE should, wherever possible, be provided for the exclusive use of a single employee, and it must fit that employee properly. Click each tab to view the details. By definition, PPE should protect the person, the respiratory system, skin, eyes, face, hands, feet, body, and hearing. There are certain types of PPE that are essential for specific hazards and situations. Respirators, for instance, fall into that category. At other times, those decisions are left up to the employer. Either way, it must be approved and used as intended. Select the right PPE for the task at hand. Here are 5 basic criteria to keep in mind. If the item passes every one of these, chances are you have selected the correct equipment for the job. The 5 criteria should consider: 1. Permeation. How fast will a given chemical pass through the material? 2. Degradation. Will it resist any softening, hardening, swelling, shrinking? 3. Penetration. Will it keep out hazards by the way of zippers, buttonholes, stitched seams? 4. Durability. Will it withstand the task at hand and resist tears, punctures, and abrasions? 5. Flexibility. Will it be easy to move and work in without interference? Once you have the necessary PPE, special care should be taken to ensure the proper sizing for the intended user. As ill-fitting equipment cannot protect properly. Also, if multiple layers of PPE are to be used, be sure that they are compatible. If employees wish to bring their own PPE to work, their equipment must follow and comply with all the necessary standards and requirements. Periodic re-evaluation of the selection is necessary in order to deal with changes in workplace conditions or wearer activities. The type of PPE selected is very important. Workers should try different brands of PPE to get the best possible protection. For example, using the wrong types of gloves to work with solvents can lead to ineffective protection. Training. Why is training necessary? To put it simply, some PPE, like gloves, are simple to put on, while others may be more complicated. Regardless of the PPE, training is required in order to ensure safe uses of the equipment. Safe uses includes how to properly put on, wear, and take off PPE. The employer must provide training to each employee who uses PPE. This training should include at least the following: when and why PPE is necessary, what PPE is required for certain jobs, how to properly put on, take off, adjust, and wear PPE, the limitations of the PPE, the proper care, maintenance, useful life, and disposal of PPE, how damaged, worn out, or defective PPE can be replaced. Regulations specify that a worker must take a refresher course if any of the following apply, before the employee is assigned any new duties. There is a change in assigned duties. There is a change in machinery, equipment or processes that present new hazards. When there is a change in energy control procedures. When the employer believes there are inadequacies regarding the knowledge or procedures. Maintenance. For PPE to protect you adequately, it must be in good working order. It is essential to do regular maintenance on your PPE. Because of the multiple types of PPE, we cannot cover the maintenance requirements for all of them. However, it is your responsibility to know the manufacturer's guidelines for cleaning and maintaining each piece of equipment. These guidelines must be outlined in the company's PPE program. It is also wise to include a maintenance checklist showing the date and the name of the person doing the maintenance. All PPE should be inspected for tears, leaks, punctures, breaks, contamination, or signs of wear before use. Damaged or defective equipment should not be used. PPE should be stored carefully and kept clean to prevent damage. Contaminated PPE that cannot be decontaminated should be disposed of properly. Record keeping. The employer must maintain records of the workplace hazard assessment and employee training. The following items should be documented: name of employee, date trained, subject of the training, name and qualifications of the trainer. Additionally, the workplace must be periodically inspected for possible changes in conditions or equipment, which will help you to detect any weak spots in your evaluations. Documentation of your walkthrough and inspection should always be part of your PPE program, and must include the following: identification of the workplace evaluated, name of the person conducting the assessment, date of the assessment, identification of the document certifying completion of the hazard assessment. You should also document the layout of your facility, or have a floor plan of where each hazard is located, and post this somewhere where all employees can see it. Another good work practice is to post warning signs about hazards found around the workplace. Program evaluation. Finally, the PPE program must be evaluated and frequently re-evaluated to determine if it is succeeding in its purpose. Are your employees properly using their PPE? Are injuries being reduced? Knowing the answers to these questions and seeing the effectiveness of your current program will help you know what changes and adjustments to make to the program. No matter what industry, there may always be someone who doesn't feel like PPE is important, or who objects to wearing it. In this case, here are some suggestions on how to overcome these objections and help the employee see reason and safety. Involve employees in the safety plan. Be an example, do it rather than just say it. Educate employees on PPE. Listen to complaints about PPE, try to find solutions, such as better fit or comfort. Find equipment that is easy to clean, maintain, and replace. Remember that maintenance and cleaning is the employee's responsibility. Employee responsibilities. Employees are responsible for the following: attending all required training sessions regarding PPE, wearing PPE as required and trained, cleaning, maintaining, and caring for PPE as required and trained, reporting any potential hazards they identify to their supervisors, informing their supervisors or safety managers of the need to repair or replace PPE, following all warnings and precautions, listening to and following directions from supervisors or safety managers.
Ja. Bon. Mhm.
Who is responsible for the following? Select the button in the employer or employee column corresponding to your answer.
Će završi i gotovo, nema tu šta. Ljudi su probili, srušili s jedne strane, ćao zdravo. Ne možeš napraviti 3 ljede, nema šanse. Znači, nešto je promijenilo u odnosu na prošlu sedmicu. Ljudi su naučili šta treba da rade. Iako je sunce, jel to mora?
Case study. This accident occurred in a cellophane tape manufacturing factory during work to wash a drum that contained an adhesive. The victim, who was on the night shift, was working with a group leader to conduct sampling inspections and to monitor the machine that applies a coat of adhesive. While they were taking turns working in 30-minute shifts, the victim did not return to work after a break. When the group leader searched for the victim, he found him unconscious, having fallen headfirst into an empty drum that previously contained adhesive. Although the victim was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, he never regained consciousness. It was discovered that a group leader on the day shift had washed the drum with toluene before the task was transferred to the night shift workers. What do you think went wrong? Ventilation was not used at a site where toluene was used. The victim bent forward to wash the inside of the drum that still contained toluene vapor. The victim did not use a respirator during the washing work.
Oh, yeah.
Lesson summary. Personal protective equipment, commonly known as PPE, is worn to minimize exposure to hazards, such as those resulting from chemical, physical, electrical, mechanical, or other sources. Common examples of PPE in construction include gloves, safety glasses, safety shoes, earplugs, earmuffs, hard hats, respirators, coveralls, vests, and bodysuits. All PPE should fit comfortably. If it does not fit properly, it may expose workers to hazards. Employers are responsible for the following: establishing a PPE program, paying for necessary PPE for workers, assessing the worksite for hazards, selecting the most appropriate PPE, Training workers and supervisors on how to properly select and use PPE on the worksite. Maintaining PPE in good working condition. Keeping records of workplace hazard assessments and the necessary control methods, including PPE. Employees are responsible for the following: attending all required training sessions regarding PPE. Wearing PPE as required and trained. Cleaning, maintaining, and caring for PPE as required and trained. Reporting potential hazards that they identify to their supervisors. Informing their supervisors or safety managers of the need to repair or replace PPE. Following all warnings and precautions. Listening to and following directions from supervisors or safety managers.
Ovo nikako nije zabavan mod više. Debili, znači, raspored. Na moju stranu dobijam debile non stop iste, koji se rasporede, znači, da se odstrele jedan po jedan, a sa druge strane, znači, 15 njih krene na jednu stranu, skrši i ćao zdravo. Debilizam čisti.
Lesson 2. Eye, face, and respiratory protection. Lesson focus. At the end of this lesson, students will be able to describe proper eye and face protection as required by OSHA. Describe proper respiratory protection as required by OSHA. Eye and face protection. Every day, an estimated 1,000 eye injuries occur in American workplaces. The financial cost of these injuries is enormous. More than $300 million per year is lost in production time, medical expenses, and workers' compensation. However, no dollar figure can adequately reflect the personal toll these accidents take on injured workers and their families. Appropriate eye and face protection is crucial to a safe worksite. What contributes to eye injuries at work? Not wearing eye protection. The BLS reports that nearly 3 out of every 5 workers injured were not wearing eye protection at the time of their accidents. Wearing the wrong kind of eye protection for the job. About 40% of the injured workers were wearing some form of eye protection when the accident occurred, but often, It was not the correct eye protection for the job being done. What causes eye injuries at work? Flying particles. The BLS found that almost 70% of the accidents studied resulted from flying or falling objects or sparks striking the eye. Injured workers estimated that nearly 3/5 of the objects were smaller than pinheads. Most of the particles were said to be traveling faster than hand-thrown objects when accidents occurred. Contact with chemicals. Chemicals caused 1/5 of the injuries. Other accidents. Miscellaneous accidents were caused by objects swinging from a fixed or attached position, like tree limbs, ropes, chains, or tools pulled
Još jedan
into an eye while a
više
worker
ovo,
was
Bog
using
te
them.
jebo, debil, koji je ovo
Where do
debilizam?
accidents occur
Bože.
most often? Potential eye hazards can be found in nearly every industry, but BLS reported that more than 40% of injuries occurred among craft workers, like mechanics, repairers, carpenters, and plumbers. Over a third of the 40% who were injured operated machinery, such as assemblers, sanders, and grinding machine operators. Laborers suffered about 1/5 of the eye injuries. Almost half the injured workers were employed in manufacturing. Slightly more than 20% were in construction. How can eye injuries be prevented? Always wear effective eye protection. To be effective, eyewear must be appropriate for the hazard and also must be properly fitted. All eye protective equipment provided by an employer must meet ANSI Z87.1 standards. American National Standards Institute. Better training and education. The BLS reported that most workers were hurt while doing their regular jobs. Workers injured while not wearing protective eyewear most often said they believed the situation did not require it. Even though the vast majority of employers furnished eye protection at no cost to employees, about 40% of the workers received no information on when and what kind of eyewear should be used. Maintenance. Eye protection devices must be properly maintained. Scratched and dirty devices reduce vision, cause glare, and may contribute to accidents. Eye wash stations. Anytime workers may be exposed to corrosive materials, employers must provide facilities for drenching or flushing the eyes and body. These facilities should be within the work area itself so that they can be accessed immediately in case of an emergency. To that end, eye wash stations should be located no more than 10 seconds away from the hazard area, meaning that workers should be able to reach one within 10 seconds of an accident. They should be located on the same level as the source of the hazard, and the path of travel should be free of obstructions. The emergency equipment location should be well lit and identified with a highly visible sign. If employees accidentally get something into their eyes, they must go directly to the eye wash station and flush their eyes with water for at least 15 minutes. They should hold the eyelids open and look directly into the water streams. They should not rub their eyes. Rubbing the eyes may scratch or embed particles. Employees should seek medical attention immediately. Eye and face protectors. Eye and face protection should be easily found next to the workstations and equipment that require it. All eye and face protection must be clean so you are able to properly see the job you are doing. Always use eye protection that can be disinfected and does not interfere with movement. Common forms of eye and face protection include the following. Click on each image to view the details. Safety glasses, goggles, face shields, welding shields.
A ti si na sredinu došao, probio.
Employers must provide adequate training for all supervisors and workers who require eye and face protection to protect from any hazards or other conditions identified in the PPE hazard assessment. Training should include proper selection, fit, and use of eye and face protection.